Welcome to the Mindful Runner podcast, a show about running and racing, trail and ultra in South Africa. Along the way, we'll be talking training, gear, nutrition, and mindfulness, all in the context of the South African racing scene. I'm your host, Fred Richardson, founder and head coach at Mindful Runner. Stay tuned as I do my best to give you all the information and none of the waffle. I think, rather than seeing heat as being I don't want to run Addo because it's hot, it's the challenge of Addo, isn't it? The course,
yeah, correct.
If it was like 20 degrees the whole way, it's a beautiful course. But now you add the heat into it, and it's a real challenge. It's not, don't just think you're going to turn up there and smash it because on Google Earth, it doesn't look that bad. Once you factor in the heat.
Yeah, no, listen, the heat is definitely can be a race killer. If you haven't included some kind of heat training into your mix, it's going to give you a wake-up call, without a doubt.
Yeah. And that's, to me, that's the beauty of getting through that. Then you get through a hot race like that, you come out the other side, and it's deeply satisfying. You took on the challenge. You're aware going in that Addo is going to be hot for you, and you come out the other end. It's part of I finished 100 miles. Didn't just finish 100 miler. I finished 100 miler in 40 plus degrees heat.
Of heat. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and I mean, we talk about the heat, but we saw it at last year's race. On the 100 miler specifically, when the guys were going through the Valley of Tears for the first time and over, most of them are doing that at night now. So that's how the course has changed. In the old routes, the valley always used to be a massive worrying factor for a lot of athletes, because they would, unless you were a front runner, like in the first 4 or 5 guys, you would be hitting that into early morning to midday temperatures. I mean, our cutoff used to be, I think it was at about 2 o'clock, going into the Valley of Tears, in the afternoon sort of thing. So a lot of people were in the valley in the heat of the day. When you're in those valleys, there's no wind in there, dude, and it's like an oven. It really, if the temperature at the entrance to the valley is 45 degrees, when you're in the valley, it's going to be 50 to 55. It really is. Yeah. The factors increase exponentially when you're in there. Now, because they're doing most of that at night, just in terms of how the race flow works, the valley can actually get quite cold at night, funnily enough. So at last year's race, the guys that were sitting at the at Foxtrot checkpoint, which is where they exit the top of the Valley of Tears for the first time, they were measuring like 7 degrees.
Oh wow.
At night, and it was misty and it was cold and the wind was howling. So guys were coming from I think we had 37, 38 degrees at the start on Friday afternoon, went up to the early 40s, then all the way down to like 7 degrees, going over the top. And once they got over the top and into the Carusa, the temperature just skyrocketed again.
So now, but that brings us to that first question, right? So where's the heat hit you now in the race besides the start? The start's always
it varies on which race you're running. On the miler, it's still your first day that first afternoon. Heat is going to be a massive factor there, because you've got the first 10K stretch, which is open and exposed on that road to checkpoint 1. Once you leave checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2 and to checkpoint 3, you are running in very, very sort of dense bush. So you now have to deal with the humidity factor as well. And you're in the bottom of the valley, so there's no wind. So you've got no wind. You've got that extra humidity from the bush being radiated back at you because of the heat, and obviously the heat itself, the sunshine itself. So yeah, on the 100 miler, definitely the first day is probably the toughest one to survive. I think if you can get through that and get through to the Valley of Tears on the miler, you've got a very good chance of finishing, without a doubt. On the 50 miler and the 50K, 50 milers are going to be going up the valley in the daylight, sort of mid-morning, I would guess. Mid to late morning. So yeah, the heat factor in the valley has transferred from the old 100-mile course to the 50-mile course now. So the 50 milers will be dealing with that heat in there. The 50K guys, definitely climbing up the first climb. I mean, that first climb is quite brutal. I mean, the 50K guys start at 6 a.m., I think, and it's light and starting to get hot there too, so and then the 50K guys have got Ellie's climb to deal with, which they're going to be hitting sort of mid-morning to middle of the day. So yeah, and Ellie's is also quite an exposed climb.
Yeah. And the 21K guys on the climb to the finish, right? That's where
Yeah,
they're gonna be.
the 21K guys on the climb up and over to their first checkpoint. Because they basically, the 21K guys follow the old 100-mile route from checkpoint 1 to checkpoint 2, which is all the way up onto the top of the ridgeline. But the checkpoint itself is down at the bottom, down at Otto's Pools now. So they're going to go up and over that climb and down again. So they've got one big brutal climb, a descent, a second big brutal climb, and over, and another descent before they get to that checkpoint. And then from that checkpoint, they've got about 9Ks, I think, to go to the finish, which is all sort of pretty much undercover. That's what the single track starts about 2Ks after they leave that checkpoint. And then they're in single track for the rest of the race to the finish, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just want to rephrase these next two questions, which I've got here, but kind of just talk to us about how important the hydration is generally and how to manage it on the course. I mean, your checkpoints are not that far apart, right?
No. So yeah, look, your hydration plan and electrolyte intake and that sort of thing for Addo is multifaceted. I think one of the most important things is you've got to start hydrating early, 2-3 days before the race. You've got to start upping your fluid intake, upping your start taking electrolytes before the race. Start building those levels in your body before you get to race day, number one. So there's a little bit of pre-prep that you should be doing. We do use Tailwind, our sort of nutrition/hydration partner, I guess, for Addo. And I think as a product, Tailwind's one of the better ones on the market to use and to train with. So yeah, if you can train with it, because that's what we provide on the race. It's a very good product in terms of replacing everything that you sweat out. You know, I mean, that's kind of like how they worked out the formula for Tailwind. It was like, what are we sweating out here? How do we replace that into athletes' bodies? So it's in my personal experience anyway, it's one of the better products to use on it. We're very, very, very happy to have Tailwind on board as a sponsor. I mean, they've been with us for a good couple of years now. Make use of it when it's there. Understand that you can't just run the race on Tailwind either. You've got to be drinking just normal water as well. So you need to sort of balance your electrolyte intake with additional fluids. You can't just be pumping salt and electrolytes into your system all the time. You're going to overload your system as well. So it's a fine balance. But those are things that you should be doing in your training as well, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, you've 100%. Got to learn how to be doing that fueling properly in the training that you're doing. So when you're doing your back-to-back long runs, you know, your 20K or 30K, 40K or 40K, 30K or 50, 40K, whatever your back-to-backs on weekends and that sort of thing, make sure that you've got a product like that and learn to use it. To avoid things like cramps and that kind of thing, electrolytes are key. If you're not putting electrolytes back into your system, you are going to cramp. And the course will make you cramp.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You know what I mean? I mean, I've seen guys go into horrific states of cramp on the course just because they're not getting enough salt or electrolytes into their system.
Yeah. In terms of dehydration, I mean, you probably see a lot of that, but hyponatremia, have you had anybody who's just like overindulged?
No, I can't say that we've had hyponatremia, but dehydration, yeah, without a doubt, we've seen a lot of it. We've seen a lot of it. Look, I mean, we've got an excellent medical team. I mean, my medical team has been with us since we took the race over 10 years ago. They know what to look for. They know how to treat it well. I don't know if you remember, 2020 was the year that we had like the really, really extreme heat. We had to pause the race for like 3 hours, 4 hours. Yeah, and I mean, I've got a video skit of, I think there were about 6 athletes lying in the bush at Ellie's with fluid drips taking from the branches, basically. But the medics are strategically placed. We know where the difficult parts are. We know where guys are going to be coming out of the route into a checkpoint and probably struggling with that kind of thing. So the guys are there, they're equipped and ready to look after you should that happen. So I don't think athletes need to worry too much about that happening, but a lot of that is preventable as long as you're making sure that you're taking your electrolytes and that sort of thing in, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But it puts the onus also on the athlete. You've got to make sure that you're carrying enough water between checkpoints as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, look, I mean, you have to be carrying at least 1.5 liters with you between checkpoints.
Yes. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. We're also going to be including 2 or 3 PDF downloads. One of those is a sweat test in which you can work out how much fluid you're losing in an hour, and that'll give you an estimate of how much you should be replacing and how much electrolytes you should be taking in. So this is just the symptoms of heat stress. I'm just going to, it'll be the slides there. I'm not even going to bother to spend much time on here, but just the fact that like heat stress starts mildly, but once you move into heat stroke, you're in trouble. You're then, and especially deep in the course at Addo, where it's not that easy to get to somebody quickly. So it really is incumbent on everybody who's out there to slow the hell down when it's getting really hot and make sure you're drinking as much as possible. Also, you're crossing streams. Like we'll talk about that in a little bit, but okay, we've spoken about this. Getting in that balance of water and electrolytes. So electrolytes are important in also transporting water into your system. It's not just a case of them tasting good, or without the electrolytes, you're not going to get water in a lot of the time. You've got to get the water into your system. So they transport it across. And that's why a lot of, as you mentioned, tailwind, it's got the right mix of stuff to get the maximum amount of water from your stomach or your small intestine into your bloodstream. Because it doesn't just come on in one transport, it moves across on sugar transport as well. So, okay, take a look at, we're going to take a look quickly at race execution strategy, right? You mentioned this already, Sean. Prehydrating, like 2 to 3 days before you actually get to the race, start that prehydration, get your electrolytes topped up. Your taper should have been such that a week from the race, you're going to run once or twice, but it's just to keep the muscles ticking over. And the primary thing to do now in that last week is to ensure that you're getting glycogen stores stopped up and your electrolytes in. And if you can aim for between half liter and 700 mils of electrolyte the night before your race, depending on which race you're doing, because if you're racing the miler, you're going to be sweating all the way up to the start. You've got to keep on drinking all the way to the start, right? Yeah,
absolutely. I think a lot of guys they forget about the fact that you sleep, but you've still got a half a day before you're going to start running, and you're going to be sweating all morning because it's hot.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to make sure that all the way, just be right up to when you start, you are keeping that fluid intake going. So when you kick off, you are nicely topped up and ready to go.
Yeah. Okay, and then from a pacing point of view, like this is general advice, and Sean did mention it earlier, like the tendency, certainly in the miler, is to fly down that dirt road. I'm a culprit. I've done exactly that myself. It is just so easy to fly down that road, and just start it much, much easier than you think you should, because overheating, like I said earlier, it starts 2 hours before you really notice it, that you start to get this overheating effect. And you'll see your heart rate suddenly starts to climb, and you're having difficulty controlling it. That's an early sign that you're getting into that heat stress situation. Then you've got to slow down, And from a pacing point of view, run to RPE, because if you're just looking at the metrics, and this is the mistake that I personally made, just looking at the metrics going, oh, no, I'm on pace, but it's 35 degrees. You need to slow down. You need to be realistic and say, what does it feel like? Because I could feel, man, it feels hot, but I need to be on pace. So you've got to pay attention to what the effort feels like. And this is why during a lot of our training, we work on RPE, on what does an effort feel like, even at pace. So you might train to pace, you might train to heart rate, you might train to power. You still want to get that internal calibration of what does an effort feel like when I'm running at race pace, for instance. And the first third of the race, like, just be cautious. If you go really easy and you control the overheating, it's unlikely that you're going to get into trouble all the way through.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I mean, when I've one of my favorite examples on having a good strategy and playing it right was Gabriel Krill. I mean, he's won it twice, and both times that he's won it, in that first 10 Ks, he's probably lying in the middle of the pack, taking it easy, walking, strolling at sections along that dirt road, not overcooking it, letting the other guys that want to tussle it out in the front burn themselves out in the heat. And his strategy has always been wait for the night time, and then he drops the hammer, and then he goes and he just takes them over, dude. And he's done it twice, and it's worked smoothly both times. And there's a guy that's won the race twice, but in the first 10 Ks, you wouldn't even be able to see him in the top 10. He's not even in the top 10.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So heat management during the race, right? Be cool if you can. At the start, if you're able to have ice on your neck or something, do that. Put ice on your hat. Just try and keep as cool as you can. When you get to aid stations, actually not even aid stations, any source of water, put it on your arms, put it in your hands, put it onto your body. Carry a cooling towel with you. I mean, cooling towels are lightweight. But you wet that in anything. You can wet a cooling towel in a puddle of mud. And you put it on your neck, and it's going to help and keep you cool.
It's going to help. And like you said, I think one of the key things is that cooling pot. Try and avoid putting a big bunch of ice straight onto the top of your head. It's not necessarily a very good thing to do. You know, if you're going to want to cool down, you want it on the back of your neck rather than on the top of your head. It does have play a factor there. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. Wear a light, breathable cap or the big freaking bush hat. You know, you want to get as much shade on as possible without overheating yourself. So
definitely. Make sure that you're wearing moisture wicking gear that's going to cool your body down as it's wicking that moisture away from you as well. I mean, that's quite an important part. Like most of the checkpoint crews will have some ice cloths or wet cloths at the checkpoint crews. One or two of them are often bringing these sort of like little water spray, you know, these pressurized spray guns that they spray down. I know the guys at our very last checkpoint are quite famous for that, you know. So the guys can come in and get a bit of a spray down, and we've moved that last checkpoint right next to Otto's pool as well. So you can, if there's a pool there, hop in and have a quick dip. If you want to, you know, it'll make a big difference. It'll cool you down for the last 8-9 Ks and just get you through that last little stretch.
And if there's a bit of shade that you can get out of the sun for 2 seconds, you cruise through that. You know, if you've got a tree overhanging a road, rather get yourself through a little patch of shade. Every little bit is going to count in getting your core temperature down. Okay, hydration and fueling plan in the heat. Sip regularly. Don't wait to get to an aid station and then chug a whole bunch down.
That's the thing. I think that's one of the key things. Get into a habit of drinking continuously or as regularly as possible. Don't like, okay, I'll run for 5Ks and top up. Make sure you've got enough water with you to make sure that you can keep sipping as you keep going. So you're just topping up continually all the time, you know, and get used to doing that when you're training as well, so that you're used to that and it's already mentally ingrained into you.
Monitor your urine color when you pee.
Very much so.
I love there's a beer chart that kind of goes from lager through to milk stout. And you want to be lager colored. When you're milk stout, you're in deep trouble.
You could be in big trouble.
So you want to watch that. It's a good indication. The darker your pee is, the more dehydrated you are. So you want to keep an eye on that. This next point: carry a soft flask or a bladder. Carry a bladder to top up for those long sections, because there are a couple of long sections in which you're going to be out much longer than you anticipate.
So there are. One of the changes we brought in and it impacts the 50 miler and the 100 miler is on the 100 miler, we had from the drop bag checkpoint to the midday cutoff checkpoint was an 18K stretch. And then they had another 17K stretch after that to the next checkpoint. So what we've done now is we've now added another checkpoint into that 35Ks. So we've broken those long distances down from 18 down to about 12, I think. And then it's about 13 or so in between, and then maybe another 13 or 14 after that, instead of being an 18 and a 17K stretch. So I think mentally it's going to make a big difference to the guys. From a hydration perspective, you've got a lot shorter distance to run before you're going to be able to top up again at the next checkpoint. And obviously that extra checkpoint in the mix there is there's more water available now for you on course, and food and that sort of thing too. So I think that's going to make a big impact to guys this year. I mean, we had 15 guys on the miler pulled out at the drop bag checkpoint last year. And a large component of that was the fear of not being able to make it to the next checkpoint, knowing that they had a big monster climb in the middle of that 18Ks. They were all there in the mornings, and it was hot. It was a really, really hot day on the Saturday. And a lot of the guys pulled out with that whole thing I said about thinking too far into the future of the race, that like looking too much at the bigger picture and not focusing on just, can I get there on time?
Yeah.
Guys were going, oh, it's 18 Ks. I don't know if I'm going to make the cutoff. And then I've still got another 70. And then I've still got this. And they just talk themselves out of it. And, Sheens and I basically, we phoned every one of those guys and girls the following week and spoke to them to see how they're feeling. Are you happy with the decision you made? And I'd say probably 80% of them turned around to us on the phone and said, I should never have stopped. I should have actually just tried to get to the next checkpoint, because I probably would have made it.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of that breakdown. But I think with bringing the extra checkpoint in, it's going to help manage that mental aspect of it for a lot of the athletes now as well. Which we want as many people to finish as possible.
Yeah, naturally.
The fewer people we have to Uber out of the bush, the better for us. You know what I mean? Because getting people out of that environment is freaking tricky, man.
No, it is.
So the more people I can get to finish on their own 2 feet, that's what I'm after. But be prepared. It's not an easy course.
Yeah. Also, in extreme heat, and if you're a heavy sweater, then you might need as much as 1,000 milligrams of sodium per hour. And that's it sounds like a lot, but it's actually just a pinch of salt. But it is a high amount of sodium. So again, we've got a downloadable PDF, which walks you through the sweat test. And
perfect.
You can then see how much you should or shouldn't be taking in from a sodium point of view. So just general strategy, adjusting to the heat in the day. It's like the first 25% of your race, start slow, be conservative, keep your heart rate low, allow your body to naturally acclimate to the race conditions rather than push it into this overheating situation. Check out that patch between 10 o'clock in the morning and actually it's probably more like 11 to 3, right? Where it's the hottest part of the day. That's when you really want to just slow down, like actually slow down. It doesn't matter if you think you're capable of going quicker or you're feeling good, just slow it down.
Yeah. Look, I mean, that being said, it all really is going to depend on the weather conditions on race weekend. On the 2020 race, when it was so hot, it was 30 degrees at midnight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and that was cool, relatively speaking, to the rest of the time that the guys were running. But still, that's the thing. Addo, we never know what we're going to get on race weekend. And I think that the key to getting through to it is prepare for the worst and pray that it's not the worst.
I'm afraid that we're doing so much focus on heat here that it's going to end up being completely wet.
I don't know. I don't want to jinx it either, because if it's wet, it's a nightmare course to manage from my perspective. Getting into those mountains in vehicles and that sort of thing when it's wet, it's almost impossible. So
if you're finishing in the heat, actually, even if you're finishing in the evening, like when you get in, rehydrate properly. I mean, if if it's still in the heat, get out into the shade, but you need to drink a lot after you've finished a race like this. Whether you're doing a 21 or 50, you're going to lose a lot of fluid. So make sure you get in a good after run shake. So the key takeaways for the heat strategy, right? Start slow, manage your early effort, prevent a heat buildup in that first half. Stay ahead of your hydration and cooling. Be consistent with your water. Make sure you're taking electrolytes. Douse yourself often. Adjust your effort by not by pace, but by effort. So adjust by effort, not by pace. Expect that you're going to go slower in the heat, but keep it steady. Relentless forward progress. That's got to be the mindset.
That's the thing. Step by step, checkpoint by checkpoint, dude.
Yeah,
that's exactly. The secret. That's the key.
And pre-cooling and race cooling strategies, like cool yourself down during the race. Okay.
As always, thank you for listening. If you want to know more about Mindful Runner, check us out at mindfulrunner.co.za. On Instagram, you can find us at Mindful Runner. In the meantime, enjoy your running, happy trails, and don't forget to subscribe.